Now, in the introduction video, it has been made clear that the primary role of the JRC is to support EU policymaking. Now, EU policymaking in general is a great responsibility because policymaking is always about shaping our future. So if we accept that policies shape our future, we also have to ask ourselves, well, who decides how our future should be looking like? Now, to provide the best support to policymakers, we first of all need data, facts, and evidences to establish a common reality between society, scientists, and policymakers. We need to talk to each other. Perhaps more importantly, we need to listen to each other, and we need to engage. Now, with the Art and Science program at the JRC, we have made an important step towards opening discussion on this divide between the scientific disciplines, art, culture, society, industries, different sectors. By producing installations co-created between artists and scientists to create a touch and feel output to research that then people can gather around and discuss and create this common reality. Now, the COVID-19 pandemic has had an accelerating impact on the digital transformation. And it seems that our JRC resonance cycle that we coined DATAMI, to work on big data, digital transformation, and artificial intelligence, is of great actuality at the moment, even more than perhaps we had it last year. I'm really looking forward now to the discussions between artists and scientists on this topic and within this new context.
Welcome. Welcome to the first event of this nomadic observatory on SciArt as our curator, the curator of the DATAMI project, named it. It is an experiment for transforming the format that was already designed for being done at Triennale during the physical version of Milano Digital Week. We are now trying to keep the same content in video format. It is, as I say, it is an experiment. I'm sorry for possible problems of transmissions, but we are anyway happy of having the possibility for experimenting new ways of expressions, new media. I want to thank you very much, Jutta Thielen van der Pozo, the head of the scientific department at JRC, who is and head of scientific development. I also thanks Milano Digital Week for having put the technical stuff behind this project. The theme that we want to discuss and we want to touch today is, I don't find it anymore, it's communication. And we will discuss of communication between communication about art and science and what communication and how communication change, as well as how these projects are developed. The project we present today, made by Renate C Z, developed by Renate Quehenberger, it's trying to give a very new ways of looking at our reality, because it's investigating high mathematics and multi-dimensional and quantum physics. I will come back after the video from Adrian Eccles, that also deserve to be thanked. Adrian is the head of the project, the project leader of science SciArt project at JSC.
Hi, my name is Adrian Ekels and I'm the project leader of the Science and Art project of the JRC, the Joint Research Center in Ispra in Italy. Last time we discussed misunderstandings and dialectics and then method. Today we will talk about language, and my prime contention will be that language is not so much a means of communication, but rather a means of discovery. Because indeed language helps you to look at things and to define yourself in your environment. From this definition, you will also come to self-definition. Self-definition then will make you want to self-express. And when you try to express yourself, then you try to be witty, to do some wordplay, some games, etc. And then it goes back to discovery again. There are some poets who have inebriated us with the games that they can play with this. So language is something very nimble. You can make castles in the sky. You can etch silver lining on clouds or on dreams. It founds myths and religions. It conjures up great monsters and great fears. So it's really powerful stuff. Just look at fake news. Some trolls are hilariously inventive and they do things that make you really laugh. So once you use language to discover the world around you and yourself, of course, there is a moment that you have to bring this over to somebody else. And then the communication comes in, of course, and communication is very important. The fact that you have to talk to people who do not understand your own language maybe makes you do the extra mile in order to explain the stuff to a person that doesn't know anything of your work. And that is what we have seen in our practice at the JRC. Thank you.
Now, in the introduction video.
Hello again. Yes, let me introduce now Renate C Quehenberger. Oh, sorry, it's not me. Should be Freddy Grunert, the curator of DATAMI project.
Okay, let's start. So, the third edition is, let's say, in the first one, what did we do? We speak with Jill Townsley and Valentina. We did something very important. We experienced human agency in computational pragmatism, twisted and structured. Then, yesterday, we have had Giorgio, Mauro and Valentina, and here it was very important that for their protocols, they, in a kind of synchronicity in transcription, they generated new vibrant patterns. These are two signals what SciArt in DATAMI showed to us. Today, it is different because today we have Renate Quehenberger and we have Frank Raes. Frank Raes is the catalyzer, the impetus, resonances in the GRC and the commission. And when the commission, when I start, the commission said, okay, they give us a theme. The theme is data, digital transformation, and RE. And all DATAMI is based on the reflection of these three, let's say, all-taking hemispheres, what we are experimenting today in surveillance and governance. Having Frank with us, it also gives us a little bit of view on where we come from. We come from something what today we call Europe with its resources and sources, statistics, secularism, spiritualism, speculation, migration, unrolled analytics, and let's say an event horizon was not a black hole, but it was a transparent hole. It was a kind of knowledge magnification with the birth of academia and the separation from the mundane. Today, all these things changed in some way. These separations are not anymore there. And I will say a little sentence what Ignacio Licata gives us for the catalog in his essay, Premise on the Difficulty of Tearing Down Walls if Walls are Spectacles. So what we are doing in this, with the Milan Digital Week is to, yes, we try to tear down walls, but in the case of Renate and Frank, there was not the need to tear down walls. They just interpret a kind of, let's say, augmented post-humanity. But there's one thing, when we now introduce Renate and Frank, what I think is common to both. Little thing to make you understand. When we speak about RE, we think that it's a sophisticated version of cognition. It's not like that. This is what we can say the magnification of knowledge, extraction. It is, and this is very important, a version of perception. And it starts, this is clear, with the perception. And what does it mean? The arts at the beginning has been involved. Today, when you look at what the ZKM has now done, the opening for the critical zones, we have new media, we are directly in the perception, in the, let's say, in what we can say, the pattern of perception. So what is very important that when we see what they call recognition patterns, they come from perception patterns, and there we have all the bias in, all the bias you can imagine. Historical bias, technical bias, algorithm bias, because a lot of the algorithms are brute force approximations. So speaking about Renate, we have one very important thing, because the term algorithm today is nearly all over replaced with model. And Renate is someone who works in models. And for her, the models are a very important point to where we can expand our mind. It is clear that Frank works on patterns in his climate change research. And so we have two things that match them. And so let's go. Let's hear Renate.
Hello, thank you for the introduction, Freddy. If you see the video, you will see that I refer to five-dimensional space, which was introduced by Kaluza in the 20th century. But you will see also that this is a very old idea which happened to be explored by the ancient Egyptians. And I guess it was with, they did it with children, like I did it with my son. And what I found out is that it will, these structures of the five-dimensional space can well work for also quantum physics. And that's why I applied it also to the dynamics of the Earth and for the aerosol formation dynamics. You will see this in the video then.
Thank you, Renate. Yes, I think that the best thing is to look at your video and things will be more clear after that.
Yes, I hope so.
In the center of this infinite 5D space machine, we find the geometrical shape of the dodecahedron, a regular 12-sided shape that the astronomer Johannes Kepler assigned to the Earth. We are living in a shape, the fifth element. Aristotle spoke of it as quintessence, also known as the all-permeating luminiferous ether, synonymous for the seat of the gods and electromagnetic forces, the light and the intelligence. Famously declared as superfluous in 1905 by Einstein, who was wrong. Where would the dynamics stem from otherwise? In meteorology, the Coriolis force causes moving objects on the surface of the Earth to be deflected to the right in the northern hemisphere and to the left in the southern hemisphere. This corresponds to Poincaré's description of counter-movements of the pentagons of the dodecahedron, here visualized by epitahedra. The same effect is responsible for the rotation of large cyclones. This imaginary sparkling space grid was replaced and actually realized by means of technical devices forming the radiance grid of satellites. We are living in two very severe cyclones, Titli and Luban, formed simultaneously in the Central Arabian Sea. We are living in an underlying five-dimensional space grid. We may also model a dynamic genesis of aerosol particles. We take the icosahedral symmetries and use what Plato called fifth element, higher dimensional spatial structure, as formation generator. It is inspired by fullerene C60 and C70 model compounds for the simulation of molecular dynamics. These spatial features may well subsend dynamics in the air that shall lead to nanometer-sized particle formation and growth in the atmosphere. Thus, we are in the midst of a living pattern that forms life and light and dust in the same way.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Renate. Maybe you can describe how these beautiful images are displayed, because they are designed to be in virtual reality visor, I think. No?
Pardon?
Can you explain how it's the video related to your installation, how it works, how the installation works?
It's the installation Gaia 5.0 was inspired by Frank Raes, who spoke also about the formation of aerosol in a higher dimensional way. And so I thought it would be useful to think about how we can apply this model on the Earth, or otherwise, how would we explain this dynamics on Earth? So I found it appropriate to use this five-dimensional space for the Earth, and for the particle formation. There's this icosahedral symmetries, which are also models from other scientists. And
yes,
I think it's important to have this perception of beyond this three-dimensional thing, what we see. We have to imagine that there is the space behind this. Is this space which Kepler was searching for, and he found actually the same space. He found the same shapes what we found in the dimensional space center, and it's just not explored because it's not in the scientific scope of the modern science, so to say. What do you say, Frank?
Frank, you have to open your mic. Microfono.
Okay, welcome.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, Renate and myself, we discussed several times about this issue. I think we found each other because we were both interested in multidimensional space and multidimensional objects. I wanted to use the mathematical language of Renate to apply to our world, our complex world, which is four-dimensional, not three space and one time, but also it has other dimensions like the political or the ethical or the aesthetical. So we have this complex word, multidimensional, and I thought with the capacity that Renate has in describing multidimensional issues with her mathematics, with that language, that we could think, as Adrian said in the beginning, language is about thinking, it's about discovering, that we could use that language of Renate to get a hold on this multidimensionality. That was a little bit the beginning of our discussions. Of course, I am a climatologist, I'm a mythologist, I work on aerosols. And then maybe Renate was taken away by my physical, my scientific background, and started to apply her language to aerosol formation and meteorology and climate and the earth. And there sort of, yeah, I did not follow her completely anymore, and she knows that. So Renate is very much a Platonian. She thinks about this 5-dimensional space that that moves everything in our 4-dimensional space. I'm more an Aristotelian, so I start really from the aerosols, from the clouds, from the climate, from the real stuff, and from there try to explain the world. So I think Renate, it's about communication and language. We were looking for a common language, but we sort of applied it to different realities, no? And we left it there at the moment. Now Renate tried to explain the whole world, all the dynamics, all the movements that we see from the microscopic to the macroscopic. I tried to apply this language to more the world, the messy world, the social, physical world we live in. And okay, that's where we ended up with. We need much more communication and explanations to get to something that we can both stand behind. I think. What do you think, Renate?
Yes, definitely. Maybe we should study Pythagoras and Kepler and Poincaré together, because Poincaré says you need a 5-dimensional space for group theory, and actually it turns out that group theory was invented by Pythagoras, and so it might be all very simple if you just see the world as permutations of space, like Descartes proposed.
Any questions from the curators? Yeah.
I will add only, yes, let's say 2 things, because we have not so much time. I think what is, for me, when Renate starts to think about the project, for me it was a kind, let's say, of come back to be active in activism as an ethical and political project. So her models, for me, are part of the Anthropocene, like a resistance we have to put. And same for me a little bit with knowing better Frank, because a gap, a friction, a conflict, what we have in these patterns is, I think, very, very, very important. There's a Paula Duarte says, data-centric rationality should be understood as an expression of the coloniality of power. The classification of subject bodies and behaviors seems no longer an affair of public registers, but instead of algorithms and data centers. We have worked a long, long time in the GSC. Jutta introduced today the responsibility and the importance in, let's say, what means to work in this kind of political level, what is very important, to give advice, how to do science and politics. What do you think, Frank? Looking at the convict, are this logical gap between the statistical models and the society, what is normally called bias, are there one of the problems we face today, that people are so unhappy with the solution scientists find to stay in this crisis?
I don't know exactly what you asked, but first of all, if you talk about science and the scientific method and the logical approaches, I mean, if you would not have had science and science methodology and logic and things, we would not have gotten out of the crisis, which came very fast. The virus came in a couple of weeks, and because of, I think, logical thinking, we sort of get out of it. At least we got the virus under control. Now, how we will get out at the end over the next year will depend very much, of course, on non-scientific thinking as well. No, political thinking, what is our future, especially how do we want to live together with nature again? No? Because both the virus and the climate, they are a result of our destructive way in which we relate to nature. We use nature, and that's problematic. Now, again, how we will get out will depend on not just on science, of course, but the virus will give us the time to get out. It came very fast, and we will have in the next year the time to get out of this emergency. With climate change, it's very different. Climate change is much more slowly building up, and once climate change will be in full swing, so to speak, now, then you will see forest fires and floodings and sea level rise and failing crops every year, everywhere, and that's coming if we don't do anything. Once it's there, it will stay there for a century. We will not have the time, as with the virus, to get out of it and think about the future, and it will only be running and protecting us and defending us from meteorological nightmares and things like that. So that's the difference between the virus and the climate. Climate is much more slower, and once it will be there, we will not have the time to get out of it. In the same way we can get out of the virus crisis, no? And that's the tragedy of our human mind. We are not able to think long term, apparently. And what we are doing can have effects over 100 years. The virus we can sort of handle with our brain, no? It comes and it goes, and we have solutions and we apply it, whether they are scientific or social or whatever, political. We apply them, it's all within the framework of our mind. But climate goes out of this framework, no? It's about hundreds of years, and we are just sitting here not doing anything, no? And that's the tragedy of humanity. We don't have the mindset to think long term. And I would hope that through art as well, no, science and art and everything else, we can build this capacity to think long term, not only in time, but also in space. We have to think about what's happening at the other side of the world in 100 years from now. So this is very mind-boggling, no? Human mind-boggling.
This was exactly the intention of the piece, because if I refer to the living pattern of the world, which was pre-Platonian, they invented the figure of Gaia. Gaia, the goddess, which is our planet, and mechanistic science takes this underlying space machine and applies it to the living system, and this is totally wrong, and this is what we should all rethink and to find again this the living part of nature. And I hope this higher dimensional perception will lead to this careful approach to.
Yeah, but I think many people will be open to new approaches. Like you have this mathematical multidimensional approach. Well, this can be applied. The thing is, to what do we apply it? You apply it to aerosol formation. I don't think this is relevant. We have to apply it to something else, not to the physical aspects. I mean, according to me, that's not what is needed now. We need it to apply it to something which is beyond physical or more than physical. No, I don't know how to express myself, but certainly we are open to new languages. Yes, it's about language, and we very often talk about new narratives. We need new narratives, new cultures, new stories. New languages is the same thing. It's the same.
But this is, to give a last sentence, what we said yesterday, Frank, I think that SciArt is an emergent property of the ecology of practice. So what is really at the base of what we do, what Isabel Wenger said, the beginning of what we call SciArt and DATAMI is an expression, is really an ecology of practice. And yesterday,
yeah, I think that's a good way of seeing it. Something else has to emerge, and it's not there yet. Because look, I'm a physicist, and Renate is a mathematician basically, and we try to work into philosophy or an art, but we have to work in something else which is emerging, and we are working on that. And it will take maybe 50 years or 100 years, like in the Renaissance. I always say the Renaissance took 150 years to go from medieval thought to modern thought. Now we go from modern logical thought to something else. It will take the time it needs. Of course, we have all the new machinery and artificial intelligence. Things go faster now, but it will take its time to get to have this emerging of something new, which brings us again in a better relationship with our environment, with climate, with the cosmos, with all these things. And so Renate is thinking in this way, in a sort of artistic way, but it's not yet linked. It's not yet linked to the physics in a good way. Or
but this is, Frank, I think this is because you in some way give the impulse to resonances, and we did DATAMI, and because in the background what we think and what Renate is a very good expression for is really what you said. Where's the cautions of this, what we are doing? Is there a space we can work in? We don't know about it, but most important is the political act that in the new apparatus there is a history, and the historical bias, we should pay attention to what is called the new Jim Code in America. You see, we have a lot of bias in gender and things like this, what are in this kind of machine, what looks like that we cannot change. We can change also this, and we can give models like Renate is building and other models to really make it more nervous, to make it bring it more on our side, more on complexity than on the power of IE, of hypernormalization. And this is what we are doing right now with you, with Renate.
We have to get out of the critical zone and come back to our beautiful sphere, or the hypersphere we are living in, and that will give us another image. We have to be aware of the space we are inhabiting, I think.
Okay.
So, thank you.
GIANNINO? Oh, 2 minutes gone. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye for watching. Ciao.